Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Discovering Dawson's Creek here on the It's a Wonderful Podcast YouTube channel. How very exciting it is. We're coming off of craziness in these couple of episodes, Janine, and they only get a little bit more crazy, don't they? I think we're into kind of dark territory in Dawson's Creek at the minute with what happened at the end of the last episode that we talked about on the last episode of this show. Of course, we're dealing with the repercussions of that, or at least the result of that, what comes from that, the day after, the emotional turmoil everybody goes through because of this particularly notable accidental death that happened, which causes one particular character to eventually
kind of spiral,
really start to spiral downhill. And that doesn't just become interesting and kind of, a bit chaotic. It becomes really quite sad by the end of these couple of episodes, and I don't like to see that. I would say, in terms of a real kind of downer in the emotional state of the whole show, this might be the saddest I've seen Dawson's Creek be at this point.
I mean, this episode,
in its 2 seasons.
This episode was pretty dark in terms of obviously the death that happens, but like how the characters deal with it, particularly Jen. It creates a big tumultuous thing between Jen and Grams, on top of just Andie and how she deals with it. As she kind of gets roped into this weird situation where, Abby was probably the worst to her in particular. But yet she gets roped into having to be a part of memorializing her. And so being so close to that death in this way brings up the trauma of the death of her brother. And that kind of is what manifests going into the second episode that we're going to discuss. But it gets pretty dark for how some of these characters interpret and deal with Abby's death.
I mean, it's kind of, it's great to get into. It's interesting to get into. And I think it's really well handled when you actually get into it. Some of the stuff that Dawson's Creek has dealt with, i.e., I would say Jack's coming out and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, it was very dramatic.
Very over dramatic. I don't think was dealt with particularly well. It was kind of just presented and okay, that's what it is. But this, like Andie's whole situation, Andie's whole mental health struggles, I think has consistently been pretty well handled.
They've built up to it. Because again, it's like what I always mention about how this show will kind of set something up, and they're pretty good at kind of circling back to it so that there is reference for things that happen later. It doesn't just feel like it comes out of nowhere.
But respectfully handled as well. And that's really the key for something like this for me. It makes it more impactful, it makes it more meaningful in the context of the show when something that heavy is respectfully handled. And given that I feel Dawson's Creek has a little bit of previous with maybe not handling supposedly respectful things as respectfully as it should have done, or as respectfully as we would expect something to be handled now. I was maybe a little bit fearful when it started going that way, but I think it comes round really quite as pleasantly as I suppose we end these couple of episodes, because we don't end in a very pleasant place at all. The episodes we are talking about are, of course, season 2, episode 19. Abby Morgan, Rest in Peace, or is it just called Rest in Peace?
Just called Rest in Peace.
I saw 2 things on my on where I watch it. It was called Abby Morgan, Rest in Peace. So that's how I've typed it in the little thing we have today. And and season 2, episode 20, Reunited.
Yeah, and it feels so good.
Apparently so, because you even get the song, don't you, in the episode.
Yes.
So let's get straight into it, I think.
Okay.
In Rest in Peace, episode 19.
Yes.
Get the binder out. The
Yes,
binder, the famous
synopses.
binder.
My binder that I printed out these synopses back in high school when I was Uber watching the show.
I feel like we should point out we have a guest today as well.
Oh, yes, we do have a guest here. My new puppy here. This is Harley.
Yes.
Say hi, Harley.
Which is a very special guest.
Yes.
Actually. Very special guest. I'm sure Harley's already been noticed by people. Just popping a little head up at the bottom
here
of the screen.
So I do actually have this trend. Since my first pet I ever had, I named them after TV show characters. And so I was trying to think of a good Dawson's Creek name for her, but I couldn't think of anything that worked.
I mean, Joey.
I mean, Joey, but then also it's like, if you don't know Dawson's Creek, then you're going to think she's a boy. That's what my thing was.
Or you're going to think he's named after Joey from Friends.
Yes, exactly. So that was the dilemma there. So, but then after we named her Harley, then I thought of, oh, what if I could have named her Lindley, like Jen's last name.
Okay.
And that would have been really cute. But too late. She's Harley now after Harley Quinn, because Harley Quinn is technically a TV character because she didn't make her debut until Batman the Animated Series. And like my other dog Dixon, he's the last name Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead. So I did the last name thing with Dixon, so I could have made her name Lindley, but I didn't think about it until this is my first dog, as we saw in my little
binder. in the binder.
I don't know where he
was Pacey.
Pacey. Yes.
Pacey the dog.
Pacey the dog. So, yes. And then I had another dog I also named Jack. So
there's something about the name Jack. I know it's so. I know, and I'm sorry to all Jacks out there, many of which that I have met in my life, are lovely, lovely people, but it's not the most interesting name in the world, is it?
Definitely not.
And I'm sure any Jack will admit to that.
Oh yeah, here's Pacey in the binder.
There's a picture of Pacey, the old dog.
Yes. So episode 19, season 2, Rest in Peace. As I told you, these synopses have a little opening statement in all caps before you get into the synopsis. So, rest in peace. Ashes to ashes. The stunning news of the tragic death of Capeside teen abruptly curtails Dawson and Joey's long-awaited reconciliation. And while they try to sort through their own feelings of loss, Jen is appalled by what she feels is blatant hypocrisy on the part of her mourning classmates. Meanwhile, Pacey is deeply concerned by Andie's drastic reaction to the accident, which triggers something in her about her dead brother.
Yes. The most notable thing I think about this episode is Jen, for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm totally with. She's actually being reasonable. Like, she's the one with the moral high ground in the whole situation. And justifiably so.
Yeah.
You completely get it. And I'm totally with Jen finally. And it feels like it's been ages since I've been totally with Jen.
I mean, there's some good and bad in it. Like, I agree with her frustration with people not being real about who Abby was. Like, Abby was a terrible person. So for you to all be so fake and pretend like she was the greatest person now that she's gone, it just rings incredibly false. And I could see that being frustrated to people who knew her and to somebody who was as close to her as anybody could get with Jen. So I totally agree with her frustration in that. But when she starts lashing out at Grams and lashing out at Andie and blaming Andie, blaming Andie for her. Yes. So, and even that eulogy was just very a lot.
It was nasty. It was nasty.
And the mother's just like panicked, and There were plenty of ways that she could say that where she wasn't even digging at Grams's religious beliefs or, hurting Abby's parents in the process.
I
So,
just see it as what is the fundamental of it all? The fundamental belief of Jen is, why are you all being overly nice? There's no reason to be overly nice.
yeah,
She was terrible. Just say she was terrible. The way to memorialize someone respectfully in her mind is to be true to who they
to who
were,
they were. Exactly. So I
which
totally
is,
agree with her thinking and her
yeah.
frustration with people being so fake about it. And
And
it's
because she was obviously there at the time, she's
yeah,
taking it harder than an
than
awful
anyone
lot of other
else.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apart from Abby's own mother and family,
Yeah.
Jen's taking it harder than anybody else.
Yeah.
And we open the episode, Dawson and Joey are all like, oh, lovey-dovey, let's all go and
Reconciliation,
run
kiss at the
around and
wedding, says I love yous, back together.
exactly.
Yeah.
They start climbing up to Dawson's bedroom for goodness knows what to find Jen in there, devastated in floods of tears. And they
Yes.
obviously don't know what's just happened. We
Yes.
know
And
what's just happened.
yes. And so she's barely kind of gets out the words and there's shock and all of that. And so I really kind of love the realistic reactions from our characters, 'cause I think those are at least the only ones we do get kind of real reactions from. Like, we
Yeah.
see the scene of Joey and Jack kind of being honest about how they didn't like her, and Joey kind of letting a little bit of a joke slip out, and her and Jack kind of laughing about, "Oh my god, I can't believe I
Oh
just
yeah,
said that," kind of thing.
it was great as well. What the hell did
I
she
know,
say
I can't
now?
remember exactly what she said. Um, but just feels like a really real moment. And even Joey and Dawson at lunch kind of really just kind of, I gotta say, like, I didn't like Abby and her, like, I didn't like her either. And them just kind of
Yeah.
being honest about that. Um,
I think this is the best way to actually consider and discuss like somebody's death. If say an acquaintance dies, one of your acquaintances, one of
yeah,
my acquaintances, whoever it may be, this has happened. I've known people who have died who are just like, oh god, okay.
yeah,
And then everybody does become kind of, oh, they were so great. Oh, yes, we were very, very close. And it's all lies. It's all
yeah,
nonsense. You just do it to try and make yourself feel better or those more closely involved feel better. And it's like, should you really do that? Because in doing that, you're putting this, I suppose, stigma on the conversation around death even
yeah,
more because you're treating it as far more, you know, absolutely devastating for those left behind when you can't avoid it, can you? Nobody can
yeah,
avoid going through grief in their life.
yes. And
So you have to I think it's wiser and more sensible to deal with it in a way of just like, of truthfulness, of this is happening. Of course, it's sad and upsetting, but change your mindset into thinking if that person is a good person, that is like, oh, that's, that is a massive shame. We've lost a really
good
great
person.
person,
Yeah.
and I am upset about that. Am I inconsolable because was I actually very, very close to them? No, I'm not inconsolable, but I'm saddened by that. But in
Yes.
Abby's case, why anybody at all is acting all, oh, she was the light of Capeside, the greatest person Capeside has ever. No, none of that at all. Why anybody is like that, I hate, because
Yeah.
it makes people terrified of death.
And it's almost like you're making it about you. Like, you have
Well,
to make yourself
exactly.
feel good, by like, acting like you were
It's
so
not
great
about
about this
that.
person. Like, they're kind of like in a grief counseling thing at school, and, like, these girls are like, "We're gonna be handing out yellow wristbands in honor of Abby." Like, nobody cared about Abby
Nobody
like that.
would
Like,
reasonably
you
wear
saw
that.
that girl had no friends. Like, Jen was literally her only friend, and even then, like, they were not the best to each other.
She was a
And
lonely, bitter, spiteful
yes,
person.
and I even love the honesty in the fact that, like, Andie, gets roped into doing this eulogy because if you remember, again, little things that just pay off in, later down the road. When Gail did that teenage girls kind of chat at her house
Yes.
for her news report, um, Abby's mom gave Andie a ride home.
Yeah.
So when Andie's in a coffee shop with Pacey, she sees Abby's mother, and Abby's mother recognizes her as one of Abby's friends. And the
Yeah.
fact that, like, she mentions that Abby talked about her fondly as well.
Which is a
So
little bit odd, given
yes.
I'm not sure how necessarily true that is.
Yes. But she does remember her from giving her a ride home that time. And since nobody obviously has stepped up to give a eulogy for Abby, she asks Andie if she can do it. And
Yeah.
Andie and the mother's very upset and gets really emotional. And so Andie kind of feels, kind of put upon to do it. So she decides to do it.
Randy's the kind of person who also can't say no to something
Yes,
like
and I love that she admits as well, because a lot of honesty comes. She's the one who's being kind of the most false about her feelings
oh,
towards Abby.
definitely.
And
Yeah.
then in the end, when she does go talk to Jen, she admits that she's a people pleaser and that she, will say these things because she wants to be this people pleaser. And and that's how she kind of differs from Abby, that Abby didn't have to do that. Abby could say what she felt, how she felt it, when she felt it, whatever. So I
Yeah.
like that there's an honesty in her kind of admitting that she was a bit false about the things she was saying about Abby, because that's just in her nature to please people and do what people want to get by and get
Yeah.
along and be perfect. And that plays into what we know of Andie up to this point, that she is this perfectionist person that has to do everything a certain way. Um
I mean,
and
however, I think Andy's eulogy ends up being pretty spot on, especially when compared to Jen's, or what
yes.
Jen says
So
at the
she found a
funeral.
way to be honest about Abby while also being
Yeah.
positive about it. She talked about or Abby challenging her, like that there's two sets of people in her life: the people who uplift her, the people who support her, the people whose shoulders she can cry on, and those people are
Yeah.
priceless. But there is also another set of people who are also just as priceless, and those are the people who challenge me. Abby challenged me all the time, and she
Yeah.
made me a stronger woman because of it. So the fact that she can talk about the harsh things that Abby did to her, allude to that and say that it made her a stronger person to deal with people like that,
Yeah.
is like a really cool way of how she was able to spin it and give Abby's mother some type of solace after Jen's insane speech about Abby kind of reminding her about the existence of the hell and terrible
Yeah.
things, and like just bashing any kind of
How,
religious positivity.
basically, how can there be a loving and rightful God if people
Yes.
like Abby exist? It was
Exactly. Like,
basically
if
that.
God
It was
made Abby in
terrible.
his image, then what does that say about God? It's, I think
It
is
was all. It was an awful thing to
yes,
say.
and Grams take this as like a personal dig because she's really laying into the
Yeah.
religious portions of the thing, which is all kind of what she constantly goes back and forth with Grams about. But even like earlier in the episode, Grams was really supportive. Like, she went in there and
Yeah.
and even Grams was honest. Like, I didn't really care for her. I always had the sense she was mocking me. And then Jen kind of confirms that. She's like, "Oh, she was mocking me, wasn't?" So they have like a
Yeah.
kind of funny little moment about it. And she makes sure Jen knows that she's there. So she tries.
And I
And
was saying before, look, I was saying before, I'm with Jen for the first time in what feels like forever. I'm with Jen in terms of what she's feeling and wanting everybody to be honest. I'm in no way with Jen in this ridiculous kind of constant dig at Grams for no good reason now.
yes,
Because
and criticizing her for her religious beliefs when that's how she copes with things like that.
exactly,
Yeah,
we've literally just a couple of episodes ago seen such a good bond
between them.
finally form
Yeah.
between the two of them, for it to just be completely reversed now, and Grams
Yes.
reaches her limit, and justifiably so.
Yes, well, because even before the funeral, Jen comes home drunk, and, like, this seeming like the first time, because I think Graham said, "Or have you been drinking again?" I think. And
Yeah.
she kind of, admits it, and Grams just tries to talk to her, and she just is very rude to her and cold to her and telling her, like, "Leave me alone. I don't need any of your religious blah, 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 whatever. And, if you can't respect my beliefs, then maybe I should just move out." So Jen actually, in a drunken kind
Yeah.
of grieving state, said that first. So then by the end of the episode, after that eulogy, it's a very cold moment. So Jen, she says these horrible things. She comes down from the podium, goes to walk back to the seat, and Grams just gets up and just gives her this cold, hurt, shamed
Oh,
stare
it's
and
awful.
leaves the church. It's such a cold stare, and then Jen just
It
sits back in
is.
the pews by herself. Um, and so then, once she's kind of realized what she said was crazy, she has this talk with Andie about it. She apologizes for blaming Andie
Mm.
for the death. They have this really great honest conversation. She says she was grieving, and she unrightfully took it out on Andie. She took it out on Grams. So she admits that she was wrong when it came to Grams. So she
It's
goes
all done
home.
now, though, Jen. You can't take it all
Yes.
back
So
now.
she's walking up to the house to kind of make amends with Grams, and she sees Grams has all her stuff out on the porch, and she's like, "Why is all my stuff packed up?" She's like, "It seems like you really hurt me, and I was going out of my way to support you and be there for you, and I've been trying, and you just felt the need to embarrass me and shame me and disrespect
Mm.
me in that way. So maybe you need to live with someone who you respect a lot more, and
She
I
says
need
it's
you to
far
move
from
out."
Grams.
Yes. So I need you to move out. So she kicks Jen out. And even just the hurt when she closes the door and we see Grams on the other side of the door really struggling, but she feels like
Of
that's what
course.
she needs to do. Yeah.
Of course she is, but you understand this from Grams. I remember Grams at the very beginning of the show,
Yeah.
and I was all like, Grams is being a bit too harsh. Yeah, I'm not sure I kind of like Grams, but now I'm on Grams's side in this
Yeah.
whole thing. You
Yes.
know?
Yes, and so we can completely understandable why she would kick Jen out, because Jen was the one who brought it up first, and then just the kind of blatant disrespect in the church. I understand why Grams would feel this, but then you also see that, like, it's not this cold, heartless decision. Like, she's
No, of
struggling with
course
it.
it's not.
As soon as she closes that door, we see her kind of very pained about it on the other side. Um, and what else was I gonna say? Oh yes, again, just some great honest moments as well. Like, I like that, I think the show could have tried to sugarcoat things or make things nice by, Andie, she sneaks into Abby's room and wants to kind of learn some things
Right.
about her so that she can give this eulogy. She finds her diary, and I think we're expecting the show to show us, because Andie kind of says this whole thing, "Oh, a diary is where a girl is going to be the most honest, because obviously, like, those are
Mm.
her own private thoughts and no one's going to see."
What
She
is it
opens,
about this show and reading other people's diaries as well?
right?
I mean, I like that Pacey's with her at this time, obviously, and Pacey's
Yes.
like, "This is weird. This is creepy. I don't want to be in Abby's room.
Yes, "Can we
Why
please
are we
leave?
doing
Why are we
this?"
doing this?" And she's like, "I need information in order to eulogize her." Um, and so we're expecting, I think the show is kind of leaning into, okay, we're gonna read this journal, and Abby's gonna be saying nice things about people.
Yeah.
And these are her true feelings that she just was too afraid to show, because she, had her boredom, and she just wanted entertainment and action and excitement, and that's why she was so mean to everybody. But no, she's just as
But
nasty
no,
in the
she's just
journal
horrible.
as she always was. So I love the kind of comedic little beat that feels in there when she's reading it. And she's saying terrible things about her mother, and she's saying
Mm.
terrible things about Andie, and then she was about to, like, read some terrible things she said about Pacey, and the Pacey's like, "Okay, I don't need to hear that," and, like, closes the journal. So I love that that was purely her. Like, she was
Yeah,
not putting on any facade. She really felt these things about people.
you
So,
can't get away from it.
yeah. So I do like the kind of fake out of, because I think you probably maybe were expecting to open the
Oh yeah.
journal and it was going to be Abby really saying these nice things. And so she wasn't maybe this terrible person that we always thought she was deep down. No, she's,
But would that not be the exact same thing that I was talking about before, of this kind of softening of somebody when they die? Because
yes.
it would be the show kind of going against what the rest of the episode's doing in wanting the conversation around somebody who's recently passed. If they weren't a good person, say they weren't a good person. Be
Yeah.
honest about them. That's
Yeah.
fine to do. We don't have to pretend everybody that dies was wonderful all the time.
Yeah.
If they weren't. You know, I think there's obviously when certain, say, public figures pass away who are notoriously horrible, and the vast majority of people are like, yeah, thank God for that. And I mean, I know it's harsh to be like that,
Yeah.
but if they were truly evil people,
Yeah.
deaths are often
No skin off your back.
celebrated, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
But
And
for
so, yeah.
grey people
Yeah.
like Abby, we must be honest with them. Yes, it is tragic that somebody died in that circumstance, of
Yeah,
that
like Dawson
age, and
Dawson
all that
says
kind
it.
of stuff. He
Dawson's like,
does.
"It's weird that she died, it's weird how she died, it's like it's weird." Like, the whole thing about it just feels so weird. So even if they're not, like, heartbroken grieving, it just feels very strange to know someone
Yeah,
your age who died in such a weird, tragic way, and just the
yeah,
fact that, like, she was this kind of polarizing person to all of them. We saw it all the way back in season 1 when we were introduced her in that really great, like, one of my favorite episodes, the Breakfast Club episode.
yes,
And so to see, like, how ingratiated she was in making everybody miserable with these very tiny glimmers of her kind of just doing all of this stuff to entertain herself because she was bored and lonely. Um, but still, so yeah, I like that the honesty of these conversations that our lead characters are kind of like, yeah, this is just weird. Yeah, I really didn't like her. Like, I like that there is honesty mixed in, that we are getting it from most of the characters. I think the one character who maybe wasn't was Andie, but then by the end we get kind of a reasoning as to why she felt like she needed to kind of
yeah,
put on this show because of the guilt she was feeling and her need to be a people pleaser. But
yeah.
Joey
I mean,
also kind of has a reaction as well that kind of is deep seated with the death of her mother, and reminds, like,
yeah,
she talks about she's not going to go to the funeral because the last funeral she went to was her mother's, and she hasn't even kind of worked up the courage to go to her mother's grave because she feels like that'll kind of solidify that she's gone, because she's still kind of holding on to this childlike dream of her mother coming back, finding
yeah,
some way back to her.
like her dad just did.
Yes, and Dawson kind of, like, telling her to let it go, and obviously, I love that, Joey kinda always has to tell him, "Dawson, you just don't get it, like, you have your 2 parents and da 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 whatever."
Yeah, you
And he's
understand. What I
yeah,
like about these conversations in the episode is that you totally understand Joey's mentality
mhm,
of she knows her mother's dead. Obviously, she
yeah,
knows her mother's dead in insane mind, but
but
to
that feeling of, like,
allow herself,
if you do a specific thing, it makes it real, like,
yeah, to allow herself that little gateway in
that
her
little
own mind,
childhood dream scenario.
you know,
Yeah,
is so perfectly understandable. And if that brings her comfort, then you can't argue with that. You
yeah.
also understand Dawson's perfectly respectful way of thinking and
Yes, so
perfectly
just,
respectful
I think
conversation
it's
of
time. Yeah,
do it, it will help process, it will finalize things,
yeah.
and you can healthily move on.
Yes.
Which is a great thing, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we all grieve in different ways, don't we? We deal
Mhm.
with these
In our
sort of
own
things
way. Mhm.
in different ways. You know, people like seeing the face of their deceased relative after they die, and
Yeah.
seeing the body itself, don't they? People like having that. I would never want to do that. I
Yeah.
haven't ever wanted to do that. When my nanny, my great grandmother, passed away not last year, the year before, 23. I made a point of, I never ever saw her body after she died.
Yeah.
I go to the grave, but I never wanted to do that. Other
Yeah.
people did.
Yeah.
And there was these discussions around, well, I really think you should do that. And it was like, no, I really
No.
don't want to
Yeah,
do that.
I don't need that to process
You go,
this.
by all means, you go and do that.
If that's what you wanna do, if that's what you feel
Yeah.
like you need to do. Yeah,
And,
no.
I was there when she died. I was in the room when
Mhm.
she died, but I was looking the opposite direction. And then as
Yeah.
soon as the the last breath
Mhm.
was made, obviously, it was all very, we had our moments, but
Yeah.
I did not look at her after
Yeah.
that,
And
because the
and
last
that's
time I looked
okay.
at her, she was alive,
Yes, yes, and so,
you know?
so it's really understandable for Joey to have this feeling that, and 3 years is for the loss of a parent, 3 years is not very long to
No, no, it's
still
not.
have that kind of feeling to deal with. So, I like that she, had this bit of a naive thought of, if I go to the grave, that it means it's really real and I have to let go of this childhood dream that, some kind of magic will come around and bring her back to me, kind of
Yeah,
thing. And so by the end of the funeral and everything, Dawson ends up walking her to the grave and she says she's ready. And she goes and she leaves some
yeah,
flowers and finally
she's nice.
goes, yes. So
It's a
she kind of is
lovely
able
moment.
so through Abby, she was able to process her
Yeah.
mother's passing. So good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the kind of the gist of everything that happened.
I would say so. I
Yeah.
think we're fine to move on to episode 20 of season 2,
Yes.
reunited at this point. However, I would like to transition in the frame of Andie,
Yes.
because she
Oh,
goes to it
yes.
in the previous episode, when she's obviously, Jen, in a little bit of a huff, tells her it was her fault because she kicked them out of the wedding.
Yeah.
This is not something you can say to somebody like Andie, and Andie
Not
not
have that affect you
completely take on
to
all
heart.
the guilt ever,
Yes. So
which
so
she obviously
Jen
does do.
yeah, and Jen does apologize when they have that good talk at the end.
Yeah, she
Um,
does, but it's not enough.
yeah,
At that
but
point, it's
then
done.
Andy remembers that, like, oh my gosh, Abby's diary had all these terrible things about her mother. If she finds it,
Yeah,
it's gonna break her heart. So she sneaks back into Abby's room in order to get the diary. And then when
yeah,
she's in her room, she, looks in the mirror and she sees Abby.
yeah,
And so that's kind of the start of her kind of seeing things that aren't there, and that's what leads us into the next episode.
exactly. Because it really does become rather, unfortunately, rather sadly disturbing
Yes.
from in Andy's story. You didn't quite realize the extent of her mental struggles
Yes.
until now,
We see
I
this
don't think.
flash of her seeing Abby in the mirror. So episode 20, Reunited. And it feels so
Of
good.
course it does. Of
That's what it
course
says.
it does. The
Oh, but it's a
stupid
question mark.
synopsis.
And it feels so
Ah,
good.
does it? Does it not? Who knows? For some people, probably in this episode,
Maybe, yes.
seemingly. For others, no.
Not so much. As an attempt to inject some much needed spontaneity into their relationship, Dawson takes Joey to a fancy French restaurant, but the dining experience deteriorates into a farce when a reservation mix up forces them to share a table with Mitch and his date, Nicole. Uh,
Ah, we don't
while
want to be
Jen,
doing that.
yes, while Jen and Gail are having a girls' night out across the room. Meanwhile, Andie's deteriorating mental state has Pacey and Jack deeply concerned as she appears more and more disoriented and anxious, but are at a loss as to how to bring her back from the emotional edge.
I love TV episodes that do this, when they're set somewhere and there's just everybody's in one restaurant at the same time for some reason, as though there's only ever one restaurant you can
I
go
know,
to
and everybody wants to go to this fancy French restaurant,
on the same
on
night
the
at the
same night.
same time.
Yes. So Joey and Dawson are celebrating their 1 month back together anniversary.
Oh, it's a big
Um,
anniversary, obviously.
yes,
The
of
month,
course.
the
Yes,
1 month.
the 1 month. I mean, in high school, it is a big deal because I was like that too. Um,
For 1 month?
I got dumped by my boyfriend, my first boyfriend, on our 2-month anniversary, like literally, and it was
Oh,
very
dear.
sad. Yes.
Oh, dear.
Um, so he wants to like make it a fancy thing, take her to this nice restaurant. So
Yeah.
and I believe Mitch and the teacher, which I just read her name and I already forgot.
Yes, Nicole.
Nicole. Um, they actually kind of shared their first kiss. They're walking to the restaurant and she
That's
kisses
right.
him and they have a nice little moment. So like, okay, things are, heating up
Yeah.
between the two of them. So they go to the restaurant, they're sitting down, then Dawson and Joey walk in and they said their reservation's gone. And he's like, no, for Leary. He's like, oh, there's another Leary. And so sure enough, they canceled his reservation because they thought the Leary that was the Leary already came in.
I'd like to
So
point out this is stunningly bad on the restaurant's part, because surely there can be more than one person with the same name.
right? Yeah.
And if
So
2 separate phone numbers ring up, you're going to know that. So
exactly.
idiotic from the ridiculously
Ridiculous
fancy, very busy French
French
restaurant.
restaurant for not noticing that and canceling his reservation. So
I
now
mean, come on.
he's stuck at a table with his dad, and it's already been, "Oh, I don't think we
And the woman he
mentioned."
doesn't like.
Yes, and we forgot to mention the one thing that did happen in the last episode was that Gail was offered a job in a
Oh,
different
that's right.
city.
Yes.
And so it's better pay, it's like high profile, it's all the things she's wanted
Mhm.
for her career, and she doesn't really see any reason to stay, as Mitch has not been really receptive to reconciling and he's seeing somebody
He's
else.
not going to be. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, why should I give up this whole great opportunity? Dawson's pretty much grown. She said, Mitch would move back into the house and then she could come back and come home, as often as she could, kind of thing. And Dawson is supportive, but he's also very much like, well, this could be the end. Like, I think my dad needs to like figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So he kind of mentioned it to his dad, and he's still very kind of not wanting to address it. Um, so yeah, so that was kind of what we're dealing with in terms of Mitch and Gail, that Gail has this big opportunity and she's considering taking it because what's the point of hanging around here and giving up this opportunity to save her marriage when Mitch is just not even into saving it, which he's shown he is not. Um so yeah, now Dawson's at this table with his dad and the teacher who told him his film was crap. And she is kind of trying to be encouraging, but Dawson reads it as false because he's like, "Oh, so you're encouraging me to that I'm gonna be doing all these fancy things in Hollywood, and you told me like I wouldn't make it in Hollywood and my movie sucked." And so it just becomes this whole contentious situation because of how she criticized this movie, but then on the other end, she's like trying to look like this encouraging person in front of Mitch because she's
Yeah, I
dating
actually get
his
this.
dad.
I get this from Dawson so much, because it's like, oh, you've changed your tune now because you want to
Yeah,
play stepmom.
yeah.
And no, I'm not standing for this. I'm here going, fair enough, Dawson.
Yes, like,
I don't mind this. This is
these last few
keep
episodes
your
with Dawson have been solid, like, he's
yeah,
learned some
he's been
lessons.
all right recently, hasn't
Yes,
he? He's been reasonable, actually,
yes, we'll see how
recently.
long that lasts. Um,
Well, yes, I am told it doesn't last any longer than one other episode. So
oh, yeah. Yeah, he gets pretty bad, and if I'm thinking of later seasons, whoo. Got some really
God, I mean,
caca Dawson moments. But this little era of Dawson, these past little episodes here, we're liking Dawson. It's
so
his
maybe a
creek again.
third of one season of Dawson's Creek is all right.
Yes. So yeah, I like him kind of standing up for himself, but then Joey's also like, it's kind of ruining our date, you just being antagonistic to this lady. Like,
Oh
we're trying to
yeah,
have a nice night and it's
and for some
messing
reason we're sat with your dad and a woman you don't like.
Yeah. And so then oh well, when we opened the episode, it was all the friend group. So Jen and Jack and Pacey and Andie and Dawson and Joey all watching a movie. I think they're watching
Yes,
St. Elmo's Fire. And then they kind of talked about how they
you don't
themselves are
like
like,
St. Elmo's Fire, do you know?
I like St. Elmo's Fire. I
You
don't like
famously don't like St. Elmo's Fire.
I did like the movie. I don't like that song.
The song is the movie.
That song is ridiculous.
The
How he
song's the
sings
whole
it,
movie.
how he sings it, the vocal inflections, like it's just the saxophones and horns, and it's just too much.
It's great.
Burning in rain. Yeah, no, it's too much.
It's
Too much.
great.
It's just too much. But so then I like kind of this whole thing of them not wanting to be called a clique or not wanting to be like the
Yeah,
characters in that movie. And
they
because they're
are
like,
though. They're very
yes,
much as
because they're like,
melodramatic as the
I
guy in
like that
St.
they're
Elmo's Fire.
addressing how weird is it after everything we've been through in this past like year that we're all here hanging out. And I like that they all kind of made these excuses like, well, Dawson was like, well, it was me just calling Pacey over to watch some movies. And then Pacey invited Andie, and then Joey, she's his girlfriend, so obviously she doesn't need an invite. And Jen's like, and I live here now. And and
Yeah,
Andie invited Jack because he's her brother, and Jen lives there now because she got kicked out. So we established that Jen is living with the Learys. So
there's enough space.
yes. So um they're at the house, and Gail encourages Jen to like call Grams and maybe talk to her, but she's just not ready. So then they decide to have a girls' night. And so I like that, they're having this little moment, and she kind of can talk to her a little bit about Mitch, and because we don't see her, we only see her talking to Dawson about it. So nice that she can
Yeah,
have like a girl to talk about this with. And she's making a pot roast and they're sitting by the fire, but then she ultimately burns the pot roast. So that's when they decide to get dressed up and go out to the dinner, and they're there. And they're able to get
to
a
the
table
same
because
restaurant that everybody
yes,
else is at.
and
Because
they're able.
basically they can either, if you want to go for food, you can either go to this fancy French restaurant or the Ice House.
Or the Ice House.
It's
Basically, the only two places in
you
town.
can go.
Only places in town. And so they're able to get a table because apparently, like, she's like their favorite news anchor or whatever. So they give her like VIP treatment, get her this table. So when she
That's
walks in,
favoritism.
it's just awkward situation because I think Dawson and Joey spot her, and it's just like, oh my God. So then Joey kind of runs interference. She goes to Jen and she's like, what are you doing here? Mitch is here with his date. And Jen's like, oh my gosh, that's not good. And then she's like, but maybe we can use this. And so Nicole's in the bathroom, Gail's in the bathroom, and they run into each other. And I love that Gail just doesn't hold back. She's very honest about she tries to be like cordial. Oh, hello, Gail. How are you doing? And she's like, I was actually planning on just trying to ignore you. And her just being Nicole just being kind of very smug, and Gail not holding anything back and just being like, this is terrible. Like, I like being honest that she doesn't like that she's there.
Do you think at this point we almost forget that it was Gail's fault in the first place that they're no longer together? We're kind of with Gail more than we're with Mitch in mentality terms.
Exactly.
It's weird, I think.
It is weird. It's weird. And I think it's a testament to these actors and how they played it. Because even when Gail spoke to why she had the affair in the first place, like she put it in a way where you kind of understood where she was coming from, even though you knew it was wrong, and even though you were completely on Mitch's side. Her just kind of being in this complacent state where she had everything she wanted, and she always knew herself to be this ambitious person, and so she just wanted to want something again.
It's
and
really
how she
strange.
delivered that, you kind of sympathize with her, even though you're fully on Mitch's side from the start of this whole breakdown of their marriage. And then when Mitch gives her all of these false starts of like saying he wants to, then you're on Gail's side, because Gail is literally like, shit or get off the pot. Like, I know what I did. If you can't be with me, then just tell me that,
then don't.
clear, point blank, period, so I can move forward.
But
don't
now
tell me
that
you're gonna try, and then when I try, you rebuff me and you tell me you can't be with me, and then you're cold to me. Then that's how we kind of get on Gail's side, because Mitch is like being all wishy-washy. If he can't be with her, all she needs is for him to just say that, and he's not doing that. He didn't do that for a very long time. So
no, the most interesting thing though is that now that Mitch is actively saying, okay, I don't want to be with you, I want to be with Nicole, we're still on Gail's side, even though he's actually clearly the most reasonable one at this point. My wife had an affair. I left my wife. I am now with somebody
moving
else.
on with someone else. Yes, and we still feel for Gail, because I think it's just a testament to the performances of these actors. And they definitely, because I don't think I really remembered how much we got of this storyline of Mitch and Gail, and so I love that these actors get a lot to do and play. And it's like this really great kind of mature juxtaposition to the big $10 word teen drama of our lead characters. So when we switch over to this very adult storyline, as an adult now watching it, like Gail and Mitch's stories and scenes and performances are kind of more interesting to me at times than what's going on with the teens. Because when I was watching the teens, I was all about the teens. But now when I'm, as an adult watching the adults, like, I'm very like, oh, okay, I'm very much invested in Mitch and Gail, which is kind of a funny thing.
Definitely.
But yeah, we do really kind of want Gail to get him back, and we feel for her when she's hurting, and when we feel for her when she asked to see Mitch with somebody else, even though she's the one who put this all in motion. Because of how Mitch handled it, I think we're able to kind of be on her side. And so, our teens end up kind of trying to do this little bit of a parent trap thing. So once Nicole is back at the table, Joey starts kind of egging on the argument between Dawson and Nicole. And she's over here talking about movies and saying, Dawson, when you become some Hollywood bigwig, please promise me you're not going to make some big popcorn movie. You're going to, make real movies. And then Joey kind of is like, so, you said he had no talent as a filmmaker, but yet you're insinuating that he could be some Hollywood bigwig. So which one is it? Kind of thing. And so she's pushing it and antagonizing it. And Dawson's kind of like, weren't you just telling me like to stop talking about this? And she's like, well, and even Mitch is kind of like, what's happening here? And Joey's like, well, I think, we're just seeing a lot of tension between these two. And I think it'll be best if you just kind of hash it out and talk about it and clear the air, kind of thing. So she's kind of standing up for Dawson, but also kind of getting Nicole riled up so she will leave, so that Mitch and Gail can have a moment. So I love that the teens are playing kind of this matchmaker situation.
And
so
Mitch and Gail do end up having a
yes,
moment.
Joey ends up antagonizing her enough, and then Dawson kind of gets back into also antagonizing her enough to where she gets up and leaves. Then I think she just goes to the bathroom or whatever. And
I think it's a little bit unfair on Nicole. Nicole's not really done anything wrong. She's just had an opinion.
Yes, but she was also kind of pretty harsh about it, and then also kind of her back and forth about pandering to Dawson to impress his dad, kind of thing.
I mean, I don't like that, okay, but it's fine. I don't care how amateur or how ambitious, how amateur your movie is, or how ambitious you are as a filmmaker. If somebody thinks it's no good, they're allowed to say it's no good.
Exactly. And
they're
then,
allowed to think that.
Yes. But then I think even Mitch getting into the mix and thinking, well, you're a teacher, you're supposed to encourage these kids, right? Kind of thing.
That's also a fair point. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So Mitch
but
also
did
kind
she
of
not
noticing.
give constructive criticism? I think she did give constructive criticism.
Yes,
he just couldn't
and
take it because he's all very full of himself.
That couldn't take it. But now here, what is annoying, I think, and I agree with Dawson, is that she's pandering to him to impress, his dad. So that is where he gets kind of frustrated, and I agree with him. And then somebody like sends a bottle of wine over as well, like before all the kind of fight happened. So, then they think it's from Gail. So she's showing this maturity, sending the bottle over, right? So yeah, they antagonize Nicole to the point where she leaves the table. So now it's Mitch sitting alone, and Gail comes over and they talk and they start playing Reunited. They say that's their song,
Mm.
and they decide to dance. And while they're dancing, he's asking her about her job. And I think even Dawson was giving his dad this kind of talk about, like, dad, like, what are you doing? Like, if there's even a little bit of a slimmer of a chance that you want, you think you could work this out, don't let her go, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
Mitch just kind of trying to blow it off, but Dawson really imploring him, she's going to leave. You better do something. So while they're dancing, they're talking, and Mitch tries to say that, like, on behalf of our son, on behalf of
Mm.
Dawson, I think it's my duty to ask you not to leave for Dawson. Like, he kind of just plays it
Oh,
like it's
yeah,
Dawson,
for
but you can
definitely.
tell it's coming from him, and like
You
saying
can.
Dawson would really miss you, like, if you left,
Mm,
and that
it's it,
kind of thing. Yeah.
it's a nice little moment. As soon as the song ends, they're just separate again. But
Yes, but
it's a nice
there was a
little
nice
glimmer.
charge. Yes, they look good together, they're really staring in
Yeah,
each other's eyes, they get really close, he's saying all of these things about Dawson will miss you, Dawson doesn't want you to go, these kinds of things, and clearly
yeah,
talking about himself, and you feel it. So when Gail leaves that situation at the end of the night thinking that there's hope, we are on board with that because that is definitely what the situation was giving. So they kinda separate after the dance. He also thanks her for sending over the wine, and she's like, "Wine? And then she looks at the kids, and they're all just like, thumbs up, like, "Yay." So she knows that, like, okay, they did this, and obviously she wants to reconcile with Mitch, so she's, like, okay with the little meddling, and so she
yeah.
pretends like, that's me, mature Gail kinda thing. And so, yeah, they part from the dance. He goes back and sits with Nicole. And Gail kind of leaves the situation feeling like maybe there's hope with her and Mitch. So she's walking on the
Yeah.
pier with Jen, talking about how she felt something when they danced, and she was very sure about them not being done. And right as she says it, she looks across the pier and she sees Mitch all being kissy face with Nicole, and she's
Yes.
heartbroken again. So really sad for Gail in this episode. Um,
Yes, but it's an interesting little something that might happen
yes, yeah.
still. We're left with their story. The whole reunited point, I suppose, is this. Um, or unless it's something else as well, which we'll obviously get into to end this episode of
Yeah.
Discovery Dawson's Creek. But there is that more of a glimmer there, I think, now for
Yeah.
Mitch and Gail, which I do like. Admittedly, I
Yeah.
do like that. That's there. It is sad for Gail at the end, but I don't think after that dance all hope is lost, which
Yes,
I
because
like.
we definitely saw and felt a charge there with the 2 of them during
Yeah.
that dance, for sure, for
Now,
sure.
misery, misery, misery. To end this episode, please do you?
Yes, it's a new day. So we open the episode with them all being friends, having a little pillow fight because, Pacey's over here
That's
saying,
what you do.
I say we're a clique. Like, we're just like these friends groups in the movies. And they're like, don't call us that. And like they all attack him with pillows and it's all cute. Um, and Andie, has her nice blonde hair. But the next day at
Yes.
school, she's rocking some dark brown hair, and Jack and Pacey have this really kind of stark reaction to it because it's just
Mm.
very different. And she's kind of very cold with them and just kind of like, just leave me alone kind of attitude, and just very short. And so Pacey's kind of like getting whiplash because he doesn't know what's going on with her. Then we see her go to therapy and she's talking about it, and talking about, and the therapist is telling her how it seems like she's taking Abby's death kind of hard, and it's bringing up things with her brother Tim that passed away and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we've seen also her talking to some guy, and we're like, Who's this guy she's talking to?"
I was quite confused at this point, to be honest with you.
Yes.
I thought you were going to be upset with me because I thought I was totally missing something. I thought this was a brand new sort of character that had come in and I've just completely blanked
Missed
it
it.
somehow.
Like, yeah, they
I don't
introduced
know
him like
how I
3
would have done
episodes
that,
ago, and you just
but it
didn't see him.
might have happened and I just didn't see it. But
Yeah.
thankfully, no, but also like it's odd how this is kind of presented, because Dawson's Creek is not a fantastical show. It's not
No.
it's not any realm of fantasy whatsoever. Is it? It is pure, steeped in melodramatic reality. Sure, it's over theatrical, but it's reality.
Yes.
So when this starts, when Andie starts talking to this random other person who you don't know who it is at this point, you don't know, this is just some dude.
Yeah.
You're thinking, what the hell's going on here? And they're talking rather fondly to each other.
Yeah, she gets in her car and the guy is like, "Did you tell her about me?" And she's like, "No, I couldn't do it." And he's like, "Oh, don't tell anyone. I'm the only one who can kind of be there for you." And she starts freaking out, having this breakdown, and then he's holding her. And so you're kind of like, "What is going on here?" And so he pops up a couple other times and he's there talking to her. And
she keeps calling him Brown.
Yes. And so she's watching a movie with Pacey, and she goes downstairs to get something to drink, and she's talking to Brown, and he's in the kitchen, and he's like, "Did you tell him about me?" "No, I didn't tell him."
We have to be quiet. Pacey's upstairs and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, and she's like, "Yeah, we have to be quiet, like, just go away," kind of thing. And she's having this full-on conversation, and so she's been gone a minute. Pacey's like, "What's going on?" He goes downstairs, and he turns the corner and nobody's there, but he heard her talking to somebody, and he's like, "Who are you talking to?" And she's like, "Oh, nobody." He's like, "Were you on the phone?" "No, it wasn't on the phone." And she's like, "Just leave me alone." She's being short with him. She doesn't want to tell him stuff. She's getting upset with him. And then Jack comes home and he's telling him, "Hey, Jack, like, she's being really weird. I heard her talking to someone." Jack says, "I heard her talking to somebody too." And he's like, "I thought she was on the phone." And Jack is like, "Well, who did she say she was talking to?" And he says, "Well, I don't know, somebody named Brown." And he's like,
Oh
and
dear.
Jack immediately has this recognition. And Pacey's like, "You know who that is, don't you?" And sure enough, he says that that's what she called. And then Andie comes down the stairs and she confirms it. And she says, "Brown is what I called our brother Tim, because when I was little, I couldn't say Timothy. So I just called him after my favorite color." So we saw her kind of get this weird glimpse of Abby, and now she's seeing, and that kind of opened the floodgates for her to start seeing Tim again. So, and that's why she dyed her hair this brown, because that was the color hair she had when Tim was alive. And so she has, has album open with these old pictures, and so Pacey seeing them, and he was questioning before he found out about this. He was questioning, like, "Why did you dye your hair this color that you had it when when your brother was alive? Like, what is going on here?" And so she's really embarrassed, and Jack and Pacey are being like so sweet and understanding. Like, she's like, "I'm
they
not
really
crazy.
are.
I see him." And they're like, "We know, we understand that you see him. Like, we believe you." Like, they're not making her feel crazy. They're not telling her she's wrong. They're like, "Yes, we believe you that you see him. We're here for you." And she just panics and locks herself in the bathroom. And now they're really scared, because, like, what is she doing something to herself? Like, what is happening? And so
I mean,
it
as
becomes
you would be,
situation.
anything could be happening at this point.
Yeah.
With Andie, we see this serious deterioration here, and the treatment of it from Jack and Pacey, like you said, is so very pleasant, so very respectful, so very soft in that way
Understanding.
that it
Yeah.
needs to be. But this is serious bad hallucination going on here. This is really, really bad stuff, damaging stuff, kind of dangerous stuff, because it can lead Andie to do maybe something that she really would regret. And I don't think anything's off limits for a show like this, right? You can have this sort of thing go on. I don't quite know how far the show goes into really, really kind of personal, if it's called kind of self-harm situations. I don't know if this show goes into that sort of stuff, but I think it could, because I don't think something like that is off limits for a teen drama, So I was fearful that that's where it was.
Because even some glass breaks, like the mirror breaks,
Yeah.
and so you're like, "Oh gosh, it's something sharp now. What is happening?" So she ultimately, and Tim is in there talking to her, And Pacey's like, tell me what he's saying. And he's saying, like, you don't need him. I'm here to take care of you. I'm all you need, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And Pacey's kind of talking her through. He's like, no, tell Tim, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you. You don't need him. I'm here. Jack's here, kind of thing. And so she ultimately kind of listens to Pacey's words and is able to, and she's telling, Timothy to go away and all this kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so ultimately she can focus on Pacey's words. She opens the door and comes out, and scary situation solved.
Yeah.
And then, Pacey kind of puts her to bed, and they kind of talk about what's going to happen next. And he's like, well, we're going to, see some doctors, and you're probably going to get some medication, and we're going to figure out what's going on. And she's like, what if I don't get better? And he's like, that's not an option. Like, that's not even part
Yeah.
of the situation. So they're gonna kind of figure out the next move of her getting better, but she's really kind
It's
of
tough though.
broken right now. Yes, and like
It
we've seen
is.
it kind of when she first had to go back on her medication and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, pay off to things that they were establishing so that these kind of big shifts don't feel like they're coming out of nowhere. And I think we've kind of mentioned, like, the only plot point that really didn't do a good job with that was the Jack thing. But every other kind
Yeah.
of big moment had these little payoffs and character moments that spoke to these big things that happen later, which is always really a great part about the show and the writing.
I just really love how with her Pacey is.
Mhm.
I really, really do.
Yeah.
I see everybody's fondness for Pacey as a character
Yes.
so much in
Right?
this whole relationship with Andie.
Yes.
I really do.
Yeah.
And this is so unbelievably wholesome from Pacey to be this way and genuinely be this way. There's no falseness whatsoever about what he's saying, what he's feeling, what he's doing.
Yeah.
It is just super tough because the episode ends with them just holding each other,
Mhm.
and you're left with this. How the hell is this going to be dealt with
Yeah.
in any sort of easy way? It's not going to be dealt with in any easy way. It's going to be super difficult.
Yeah.
And I hope it continues on as a relationship again. I don't know. Obviously, this is my first time watch. I have to assume it doesn't because these things do happen, but you want it to, which
Yes,
is the
because
point.
there's the Pacey's devotion to her, Pacey never having something like this, her bringing out the best in him,
Yeah,
being able to be this really important figure to her, having something to care so deeply about. um it's making him a better person, it's making her a better person, this relationship. So you want to see it thrive and succeed, but this is a really
yeah,
difficult thing. So
it
but
is.
how Pacey handles it is so beautiful. So yeah,
I
my
mean,
man, my man. Mm.
well, yeah, but God, we only have one more episode of Discovering Dawson's Creek left for season 2 of the show.
Yes. Yes.
The finale of season 2 of Dawson's Creek we will be discussing next week. I am led to believe Dawson does something absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
The worst thing he's done so far? Question mark.
Yeah.
Oh God! I mean, this is going to be seriously bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Okay. Are we looking forward to it? Yes, I think we
Yes.
are. We're looking
Yeah,
forward to
'cause
getting into season 3 as
yeah.
well.
Yes, because I do believe
Um,
this is leading into some of my best favoriteest things from Dawson's
okay.
Creek. So, yeah.
Okay. Nice. It's interesting though. I mean, we're at an emotional point in the show, a highly, highly emotional point in the show. So, what comes from this? We thought that last time. What comes
Yeah.
from Abby's death? We saw what comes from Abby's death. Andy's serious deterioration.
Yeah.
What comes from Andy's serious deterioration, and what comes from Mitch and Gail's potential glimmer.
Roadblock. Yeah, I mean, they have this opportunity. The vibes are still there. Enough time has passed. He seemingly, wants her to stay, but he can't say that through his own words, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So yeah,
crazy to think about. We will
yeah,
be back
lots
in
to
a
look
couple of
forward to.
weeks.
Yeah.
Of course, we alternate. Morgan Hasn't Seen TV, this show, every Monday on the YouTube channel. Discovering Dawson's Creek, this show with Talking Ted Lasso, of course, every other Monday. Subscribe, ding your notification bells on this channel for all the fun stuff we have here, including, of course, all these shows on a Monday. And subscribe, obviously, to the main podcast feed. It's a wonderful podcast wherever you find your podcasts on all major platforms. For the main show and Morgan Hasn't Seen itself, every Friday and Wednesday, or celebrating old movies, of course, on Friday. It's always very fun. On every single episode we have. If you want to support us on Patreon or donate, there's things been scrolling down at the bottom of the screen all episode long. Links are in the description. Social media links are also in the description down there, as well as obviously scrolling down at the bottom of the screen. Find us all there. Support us in those ways if you are feeling so inclined. And join us for the season 2 finale of Dawson's Creek in a couple of weeks' time on the new Discovering Dawson's Creek. Janine, anything else you want to say? Plug away. Anything?
No.
No, simply that.
You said all the things. So
I did. It's all there at the. It's all there on the bottom.
It's all there.
Today,
you can find it. Yeah.
It is. Well, there is only one thing left to do, and I mean, what impression do we do? We can't do a whiny Dawson. He's not very whiny, so there's not really any impression to be done. That's really the only Dawson's Creek impression we can possibly do. So, Janine, go ahead, take us out in whatever way you deem appropriate. 3, 2, 1. Bye. Yeah. Dawson.